Today we're going to demonstrate how to shorten a PTO shaft for a rotary tiller on the back of a subcompact tractor. In this case, it's a 4-foot rotary tiller, forward rotation, on a Kubota BX2360. In many cases, the PTO shafts that come with these tillers are a bit too long for the smaller subcompact tractors, so we're going to shorten it up to allow it to work properly. Now, the first step in this process, we need to get our measurements. We need to understand what length the PTO shaft needs to be. And what we're going to do, we're going to measure from the detent locations on each PTO shaft connection point. As you can see, from detent there on the left on the rotary tiller down to the detent on the PTO shaft on the tractor, we're looking at about 25.5 inches. Right, now that we have the length from the tractor, which was 25.5 inches from detent to detent, we want to measure from detent to detent on our PTO shaft. And you want to make sure this shaft is completely compressed down. It is. It's the shortest length it can be right now in its current configuration. And from detent to detent, we're looking at 28 inches. Okay, for those of you that are visual learners like myself, I wrote out what I tried to explain earlier. We have a PTO shaft length of 28 inches. We have a tractor to tiller length of 25.5 inches. That's the length that our shaft needs to be to work correctly. So it gives us a current difference of 2.5 inches. Now we need to add an additional 2 inches onto our difference. That 2 inches comes in for connecting to and from the tractor. If you didn't have that extra 2 inches of compression, you would not be able to get to the end of your PTO shaft onto the tractor shaft properly. You would be in a bind there. So total, in my case, we have 28 minus 25.5 gives us 2.5 plus the 2 to allow for connecting to and from. So we have a total of 4.5 inches to be removed, and this has to be removed from each side of the shaft. So next up, we're going to separate the metal inner shafts from the plastic protective sleeves, and then we'll mark it out, measure it out 4.5 inches off of all 4 pieces, both pieces of plastic shields and both pieces of metal shaft. Now, with our PTO shaft separated, we need to remove the plastic protective covers from the inner metal shafts. I got a little instruction booklet that came with the tiller here, and it mentions that to dismantle the inside tube from the outside, we need to take a screwdriver and depress the buckle from one to another, and then take the outside tube apart from the plastic. So it looks like we have a few places around the PTO shaft that we need to depress with a screwdriver, and then hopefully it'll let that buckle loose and we'll be able to slide the plastic off. All right, now as I said, in my case, I have 4.5 inches to be removed from each side of this PTO shaft assembly. That's because I've got a 2.5 inch difference plus an extra 2 inches to allow for the connection to the tractor. So we're going to measure off 4.5 inches. And then for our plastic tubes here, I want to make sure we measure from this end and this end, because these ends with the slots are the ends that actually go into our U-joint protective covers. So we need to measure 4.5 here, 4.5 here. It's time to start cutting our pieces of the shafts. Just got a generic reciprocating sawzall, Harbor Freight brand. 24 tooth per inch bimetal blade should give us a pretty nice fine cut. And definitely make sure you wear some safety glasses and some gloves. Now for cutting the metal shafts, I've put a microfiber tile around the shaft for clamping it down in the vise, just to make sure we try to avoid any vise teeth marks marring up our shaft, which may prevent it from sliding together as easily in the future. Now that we've cut our shafts down to proper length, we do want to do a little cleanup here. As you can see, there's some metal shavings. I've already used the shop vac to vacuum down inside. However, we still need to clean the outside, get some of these metal shavings off. So I'm just going to use a little brake clean. I'll obviously be removing my grease here, so we'll have to re-grease these before we put them back together. But this will help make sure we don't have any metal shavings going down in these tubes and causing them to bind up. Plus, it looks like the grease actually helped us from having it previously greased. Before we found out we needed to shorten it, the grease actually helped catch the metal shavings. All right, now we want to remove some of the rough edges. You could do this with a Dremel tool, even a little grinder wheel with maybe a flapper disc. But a good old hand file will do. Now, before reassembly and before putting our protective plastic covers and all back on, we're going to go ahead and grease this up a little bit just to knock that out. Got my grease gun here. Just going to pump a little bit out. Apply it liberally to PTO shaft. Slide your plastic shafts back on. Smaller piece goes in first. You gotta make sure you line up the round pegs and square pegs with that white plastic collar that was still on here. Then you can bring the U-joint protective shroud up and on. Just gotta make sure you line up the couple of little slots or splines and get the 3 tabs to pop into place. You probably have to take a screwdriver, come in from the top and push them out and make them lock in properly. All right, now we've got our 2 halves put back together. Protective shrouds are good where they should be. We can slide our newly shortened PTO shaft back together. You'll have to fiddle with clocking it. It'll only go one way, but check that out. Nice and short and compact. Slides in and out very nicely due to us greasing that shaft. And if we measure, perfect. We're at 23.5 inches from lock pin to lock pin. The reason it's 23.5, as we recalled, 25.5. 25.5 was our total length that we needed. We took off an extra 2, so We're perfect. We're going to get this back installed onto the tractor and the tiller now.
Ready, and as you saw, I had to remove the bolt and nut assembly from the tiller side of the shaft. So we'll get that put in and we'll be done.